And today's topic is of particular interest to me as CEO of Even Break. We're talking about the accessibility of technology. And it's a really important issue for lots of reasons. And often when we talk about accessible tech, we talk about customer-facing technology. So are our customer-facing websites accessible? Usually not. In our case, it is, but we're rare. But often we focus on the accessibility of the technology that customers and clients might use, the public generally. But as I said, increasingly employers are more diverse. The workforce is more diverse. We are employing more diverse disabled people. As I mentioned at Even Break, we're all disabled. And so it's not just the tech that we use that the public uses, it's also the tech that we use internally for our own staff. And at Even Break, we have people with a variety of different conditions, which might include sight loss, which might include hearing loss, which might include dexterity around using keyboards or a mouse. And so for us, it's really important that any tech that we use internally as an organization is accessible to everybody within the organization. And you would think in 2022 that would be quite simple, and it really, really isn't. So when we're looking for tech, which might be customer relationship management or might be an e-learning platform or whatever it might be, we have to check that it's accessible before we buy it, because otherwise we have staff who can't use it, and that's no good. And usually we can do that, and there are times that we can't, but it's a constant battle. And so I'm absolutely thrilled that we're going to learn about this subject from some experts today. And I'm delighted that we're going to be joined by two companies who have a lot to say on this subject, a lot of experience in this area. Citizens Advice, who've been clients of Even Break for a very, very long time. And they're bringing with them Accenture, who are also obviously well known in this field. And so I'm delighted that they're going to be sharing with us three different case studies, three different approaches to internal tech and how we can ensure that that's accessible. As they go through their presentation, I'm sure that you'll have questions that occur. If you could jot those down in chat, that would be fantastic. And then what we can do at the end of the session is come back to those questions and address them at the end. But rather than you wait till the end and think, oh, what was that question I thought about 50 minutes ago? If you jot them down in chat as we go along, that would be absolutely great. So that's enough from me for the moment. I'm going to come back later and look at the questions with you. But what I'd really like to do is hand over to Marianne Pope from Citizens Advice, who's going to introduce the session to you. Over to you, Marianne.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Jane. And hi, everyone. So I'm Marianne Pope. My pronouns are she, her, and I am a senior product manager at Citizens Advice. And hopefully you can now all see my screen and I will be presenting. So let's get started. Well, as Jane said, the session is about the importance of digital accessibility in workplace tools. And we'll start off with a quick kind of introduction, and then we've got three separate case studies looking at this from kind of different angles, and then we'll finish with the questions. So let's jump straight in. So why does the digital accessibility of workplace tools matter? Well, let's start with some data. More than 1 in 5 working age adults is disabled, and that's from the DWP. And it also doesn't include all of the people with a temporary impairment. So the real number potentially at any one time is higher. But according to the ONS, the employment rate among disabled people is only 53.5%, which is compared with 81% for non-disabled people. Add to that the fact that living costs are nearly £600 higher every month if you're disabled, according to the charity Scope. And you can see why access to work for disabled people really matters. And actually, I should say that £600 extra cost could be even higher now that the cost of living is kind of going up across the board, because that data is from a couple of years ago. So really the disparity there between disabled people and non-disabled people in terms of access to work is really significant and has a real impact. And after 2 years or more of kind of widespread home working as a result of the pandemic, physical mobility is now less of a barrier to the workplace than it's ever been before. But in many cases, the technological barriers still remain. So given the chronic staff shortages that have been affecting many sectors over the last several months, you can see that there are huge benefits for employers in supporting disabled people into work. So it makes sense that digital tools that people use in the course of their work should be accessible to everyone. But what does digital accessibility actually look like, and how do you make it happen? Well, hopefully we're going to show you that through the course of the next 3 case studies. And the first one is all focused around tools that are built in-house. We're going to talk about this by way of a case study that is from Citizens Advice, which is the organisation that I'm based in. And we have an internal case management system that is built and maintained in-house, which is known as Casebook. Now, it was launched in 2017, and despite being overwhelmingly popular with users, we do have one major problem. You can probably see where I'm going with this. It's not fully accessible. And that means that it limits the ability of people who use assisted technologies and others with digital accessibility needs from using it in the same way as someone who does not have those needs. So as a charity, for context, we rely almost entirely on external funding to pay for our work, and we have to make that funding go as far as possible. Now, because of this, the development team that builds Casebook is constantly in high demand because Casebook is a hugely strategically important tool that almost everyone in Citizens Advice uses in one way or another. But our team size is limited by funding constraints. So as a result, we have to very strictly prioritise what we work on. And there are lots of things that we would love to do that we just don't have capacity for. So given that the majority of the nearly 30,000 staff and volunteers who use Casebook do not have digital accessibility needs, why are we spending our time and money on it? Well, for one, there's the obvious economic sense that I outlined just a minute ago. So perhaps if Casebook, which you pretty much have to use if you want to work at Citizens Advice, were accessible, we would actually find that we can employ more people who happen to have digital accessibility needs. So the pool of people we employ from could be bigger, which is, as you know, from an employment perspective, is obviously a good thing. But for us, it's actually also more personal than that. So equity, diversity, and inclusion are really core to our being at Citizens Advice. We are an inclusive employer, and it is vitally important to us that our staff reflect the people who we help. And we know that that cannot happen if disabled colleagues are excluded from using our digital tools, which are essential. So even if there were not that clear economic case, this, and this would only benefit a small number of people, we would still prioritise this work to make their experience more equitable. So for this reason, we have an organisational commitment to bring all of our digital tools up to the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines 2.1 AA standard. And for anyone who's not familiar with those words that I just said, the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, or WCAG, WCAG 2.1, are the international standard for digital accessibility. And there are 3 tiers, starting with the A standard at the bottom, and then the AA, and then the AAA for the most accessible sites. So we have committed to that. But how did we actually start on our journey towards meeting that commitment, and what did we do to address it? Well, I'm going to talk you through our 3-part plan of attack, starting with how we picked off the low-hanging fruit. So there are some things that are really easy to get your head around with almost no experience of accessibility. And that includes things like contrast, font size, and the ability to zoom or magnify content. Those were the obvious places to start because we could get on with them straight away, and because they are the relatively small effort of making those changes is massively outweighed by the benefits that they bring to users. Now, luckily for us, since Casebook is a very big and complex application, we found that the design of many of our pages was actually already up to scratch in those regards, thanks to the kind of previous ad hoc efforts of our design team and our developers to improve things over previous years. So we were able to focus on making those changes on the remaining pages by bringing them into line with the majority. And you can see on the right there just a sample screenshot of one of our core pages, and you can see that we've got good colour contrast. You can maybe tell that the font sizes are good, although obviously that's a scaled down image of the page. And I can't show it on this slide deck, but users can actually zoom in up to 500%, and the page is still totally sharp and can be navigated as normal. So we started with that kind of, easy stuff. Let's just get it in place. But we didn't have the in-depth level of expertise in-house to go much deeper. So our second step was actually to get an external audit of Casebook to measure it against the web content accessibility guidelines that I mentioned earlier, to see what we needed to do to meet the AA standard. There are various organisations who do these audits where real users with real digital accessibility needs test journeys across the website or whatever your application is, and then they provide a report highlighting any problem areas. And you can see a screenshot there on the right-hand side showing us the many things that we needed to do to reach not only the AA standard, but actually just to reach the basic A standard. And we knew before we got these results that we had a lot to do to bring Casebook up to scratch, but I won't lie, seeing this long list was definitely a bit scary. But the good news is that in addition to highlighting the problems, the auditors actually also offer suggestions for how to fix the problems too. So that includes technical information for the developers, for example, and it gave us exactly what we needed to get on with it. And we've been methodically working our way through that list for the last several months. Just for context, the whole audit process was quite pricey, but without the expertise in-house, we couldn't have got much further without it. So it was absolutely essential for us. And if you don't have experts in-house either, I would thoroughly recommend doing something similar. Third and final pillar of our plan was actually to upskill the team working on Casebook, myself included. So our whole team was encouraged to find ways to increase their understanding of accessibility, because none of us had got a significant amount of previous experience in the area. We're not people who use assistive technologies or have particular digital accessibility needs, most of us. And we did this in kind of various ways. So for some people, they found that the best way for them was to find broad information about accessibility online, whether it was in the form of articles or training videos. Others found it easier to explore specific problems by talking to experts outside the organisation or finding forum discussions online, of which there are many. And a couple of colleagues actually attended some more formal training to give themselves a really solid grounding in the principles of accessibility. So that was kind of our third and final pillar. But having said that, I will add that we're conscious that accessibility standards do change and evolve in exactly the same way that technology advances over time. So we know that this isn't a once and done exercise, and it's something that we will need to keep up to date, whether that's through more training, continual reading, that kind of thing. So where are we now? Well, it's been nearly a year since we started our accessibility journey in earnest. So having spent nearly 12 months upskilling ourselves and around 8 working through the problem areas highlighted in our audit, have we reached our goal of being WCAG 2.1 AA compliant? Well, no, the short answer is no. We're not actually even at the basic A standard yet. The truth is that we had a lot to do, and we're still plugging away at it. And also, as I mentioned earlier, we do have limited capacity and lots of different demands on our shoulders. So while it has been probably the top priority piece of work we've done over the last year, we've had to balance it alongside kind of other commitments, which has sometimes slowed us down. But that's not to say that we haven't made good progress. And we actually had the site retested earlier this year by the same auditors who did the first audit. And they confirmed that we are much closer to the A standard than we were before, which gave us a huge boost. And arguably, more importantly, we actually asked people who use Casebook with assistive technology tools to give us a feedback rating for their experience of using this application. And we asked them to do that before we'd made any changes highlighted in the audit. So back in around March, I think it was. And then again, after 3 months of dedicated accessibility work in June. Now, the first time we asked, respondents rated Casebook a 5 out of 10 when using it with assistive technologies, which compared really quite poorly with an 8 out of 10 from users who don't use assistive tech. After just 3 months, however, that score had gone up nearly 50% by 7.3 out of 10, which really knocked our socks off, to be honest, because we weren't really expecting to see such a tangible impact in such a short space of time. We're actually going to do another survey like that soon, and really hoping that we're going to see a continuing upward trend. But having done so much learning this far, we feel that we're in a much better position than we were this time last year. So it's making it much easier to kind of face those remaining items on our list. But I suppose what I'm trying to say is you don't have to be perfect straight away. And it might be quite scary looking at the state of your in-house digital tools right now and realizing potentially that you have quite a mountain to climb. But the most important thing is to start, because even the small changes could make quite a significant difference in terms of accessibility to your staff. But anyway, what if you're not building tools in-house? What if instead you are procuring tools from the market? Well, now I'm going to hand over to some of my Citizens Advice colleagues to talk about exactly that. So Lindsay, it's over to you.
Thanks, Marianne. Hi, everybody. I'm Lindsay Johnson. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm product design lead at Citizens Advice. So like Marianne said, we've heard about creating accessible products in-house, but what if you need to procure an accessible tool for your workplace? So when we think about building accessibility into the procurement process, that's really key. So at Citizens Advice, we do that in a number of ways. So the first thing that we would do is add accessibility requirements into our invitation to tender. Secondly, we would make sure accessibility is included when we score those supplier responses we receive back. We would complete usability testing or audit the product to check that it's doing what the supplier says it is capable of. And finally, we'd make sure accessibility features are added into the contract. So what should you look for and add into your invitation to tender, and what should you look for in your responses that you receive back? So adding in that your product or tool should meet the latest AA standards of the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines is really important. And good evidence of that would be an audit showing that their tool meets AA standards, even better if it's evidence of meeting AAA. You should ask for evidence of the supplier's approach to testing with users, and good evidence of this would be examples or case studies of testing with real life users. It's also good to check for evidence that the product works with assistive technology, so such as screen readers, screen magnifiers, keyboard input, or speech recognition software. And again, good evidence of this would be testing with real people who use that assistive technology and whether that product has passed or failed in certain areas. And finally, you'll want to make sure that the supplier has a commitment to making accessibility fixes in the future, especially if you find that the product isn't yet fully accessible. So good evidence of that would be an accessibility statement or a roadmap that details and prioritizes fixes going forward. So once you've done your scoring and you have your preferred supplier, the next step would be to check that the product is accessible, as we've stated. And one option could be to sort of run usability testing in-house. And this can be a really good option if you've got staff with research skills or user experience skills in your organisation. But if you choose this route, it's really important to build in enough time to your procurement process to make sure you allow for planning and running the test, as well as gathering all those findings, and then being able to feed those back to the supplier so that you can agree any actions needed before you sign the contracts. So start by designing tests. So think of a few common scenarios that your users may need to make using the product. So a recent example at Citizens Advice is an employee HR system. So a scenario might be, I need to book annual leave, or I need to view my payslip. So those would be really common journeys that the user would take on that software. You then need to create a script with those scenarios that you can use in the testing that explains to people what you're asking them to test. And then you'll also need to speak to supplier and arrange things like access and logins to the product. You can then start recruiting participants. So you should aim for around 6 people, and particularly those who use assistive technologies. As I mentioned before, things like people who use screen readers, screen magnifiers, use speech recognition software, or keyboard input to navigate. There's different ways you can recruit people. You could put a call out to staff asking them to volunteer. Or if you don't have that, you're not able to do that in your own organisation, then you can contact other organisations. So people like RNIB Test Labs or AbilityNet are able to recruit users on your behalf, but you will need to set aside some budget to be able to do that. For the testing, make sure you let people know how much time they'll need to commit, give them an overview of what you're asking them to do, and any of the requirements needed to take part. Once you've done all that, you can then start thinking about running the actual tests, and you'll need to arrange someone to lead those with the users, as well as somebody to note take and record the sessions. Make sure you gain consent with people taking part, and do let them know what you're going to do with that information they share with you. Make sure you've done a sort of technical run through a few days before the test. Make sure the technology works, as well as practicing that your script and scenarios flow really well and that they're really easy to understand. So during the tests, you need to ask participants to complete the scenarios using the product in the way they normally would. So for example, someone would be using their own computer with their own screen reader software that they're already familiar with. Make a note of their interactions with the product and any problems they encounter with completing the task. Then you can synthesize your findings. So once you've completed all of those, gather all of your notes together, look for common themes and common issues, and then you'll want to share those with the supplier. And one thing that can be really good if the supplier hasn't done much of their own testing before is to invite them along to the sessions to see firsthand how their product's performing. Alternatively, if you've asked for consent from participants to record the sessions, you could share those with the supplier directly. Or finally, if those aren't options, you can create a short document with all the key findings and share that with supplier. But I guess the key is to make sure that those can be agreed, what fixes are needed before you feed into the contract stage. So that was just one way to check usability. As Marianne mentioned earlier, another option is doing that external audit as well. I'll now hand over back to Marianne, who can talk us through a case study of Procuring contact centre platform.
Thank you, Lindsay. Yes, so at the end of last year, we needed a new telephony and contact centre platform for staff working on our remote advice channels. So that's things like phone and web chat as opposed to in-person or face-to-face advice. Now, the key difference for us compared with other organisations who might be looking for something similar was that we were specifically looking for a product that would meet those WCAG AA standard accessibility requirements, because that's what we've committed to providing for our staff and volunteers. So how do we make sure that we found one that was truly accessible? Well, step one was to make accessibility the dominant factor in the requirements, and 2/3 of the selection criteria, in fact, related to accessibility. In this specific case, this was an absolute no-brainer for us because there are countless suppliers that provide these kinds of platforms for contact centres. Basically, every medium to large organisation with a phone number will have something similar that they use. And many of those third-party suppliers have very similar functionality. So the accessibility was always going to be a differentiator. So after that, having set those requirements, the first assessment stage was actually a kind of self-certification. So asking the applicants to judge themselves against those criteria that we had set. But we wanted to be 100% sure that those solutions were in fact up to scratch. So rather than just taking their word for it, we then brought in our external experts again to audit the suppliers against the guidelines. And as I mentioned earlier, we just don't have that level of expertise in-house, which is why we went back to the auditors. If you also don't have the expertise in-house, as Lindsay said, it's worth noting that an alternative option might be user testing with real users who have digital kind of accessibility needs. So that's another way that you could look at it. But I'm assuming most organisations probably don't have digital accessibility experts in-house, so it's worth thinking about where you can get that from. And then finally, having gone through that stage, once the selection process was complete, step 3 was actually to agree a contractual commitment to maintaining the AA standard for the duration of the contract, to recognise the fact that accessibility is not something that you achieve and then you forget about it, but it actually needs to be maintained. So what did that actually look like in practice? Well, we had 35 potential suppliers submit applications. So that means that they believed that they could meet the strict criteria that we had set out. Those 35 were each then assessed on the basis of the selection questionnaire, which, as I mentioned, was heavily weighted towards accessibility criteria, but only 7 were selected to move into the second stage. The remaining candidates were then assessed by our third-party experts, which further narrowed the field, leaving just 2 suppliers who could actually deliver the AA standard phone platform that we were after. Now, I don't know how quick you are at maths, but that is just under 6% of the applicants, which I find quite surprising, actually. But despite that, in the end, this was actually a very successful process for us, and we found what we were looking for in terms of accessibility from Accenture's Connect platform, which you'll, I think, hear a little bit more about later. But that might not always be the case. So what I'll do now is I'm going to pass you over to my colleague Matt, who is going to talk about some of the common challenges when procuring for accessibility.
Thanks, Marianne. My name's Matt Pullen. My pronouns are he, him. I'm the commercial and contracting manager at Citizens Advice. So, yeah, I'm going to talk about some of the challenges you might encounter when trying to procure accessible products, starting with sort of internal challenges and then moving on to external ones. So the first challenge is buy-in from your organization. I think most people would say that having accessible products in general is a good idea, but there can be resistance when it comes to a product that someone specifically wants to purchase themselves. And there's difficult conversations to be had about how important accessibility is for an organization. So, for example, is the organization happy to have a lower quality product, but that's more accessible? Or on the other side of things, is the organization prepared to pay more for an accessible product? And if so, how much? And in an ideal world, these sorts of conversations would be happening at the most senior level of the organization, and the kind of senior leaders could provide guidance as to where the organization stands on those sorts of questions. Secondly, as we've kind of heard, resource can be a major issue. As we've seen earlier, extra time will be needed to design and run tests, including recruiting users for those tests. And a lot of organizations may not have that resource in-house, which then adds a monetary cost to the procurement exercise of bringing in external resource. Capability is also an issue. So an organization might not have people with the relevant skills, such as researchers or UX designers, product designers, to help guide and design and run the tests. So again, that might be an additional cost, as you need to get external resource to help with that kind of testing phase. So moving on to external challenges, I think it's fair to say that the value of most contracts are quite small when compared to the overall turnover of the supplier that those contracts are with. So only the very largest customers are likely to have a significant influence on the direction or changes a supplier makes to its product. So just putting accessibility requirements in your invitation to tender is unlikely on its own to cause suppliers to make it their top priority. As we've seen as well, there can be a lack of availability of accessible products. So while you might put it as a requirement in your invitation to tender, it's not unlikely that you end up with no suppliers that can provide an accessible product. And then finally, accessibility in the contract. So we heard how we managed to get it into our contract for our phone system, but that's not always the case. So a supplier that doesn't have a fully accessible product might, in their tender response, say that they're committed to building accessibility into their product in the future, but might be less willing to commit to that contractually, particularly with software as a service products, as suppliers are unlikely to want to kind of restrict themselves in terms of their future development options. All of these things can seem sort of a bit disheartening, but particularly for the external case, it's important to kind of remember that these are issues that come up when you're looking at just a single invitation to tender going from one organization to a supplier. But what we need to remember is sort of collectively, if enough organizations start putting accessibility requirements into their invitation to tenders, then suppliers will see that it's an increasingly important consideration. If the more and more people that do it, the more that they'll see that it's something that their customers want, and the more that they'll have to react to that. I'm now going to pass over to Rowena from Accenture to talk about building accessible products to sell.
Thanks, Matt. And I just want to start by thanking Citizens Advice for inviting us and having this opportunity to talk with you today around accessibility, because it's a hugely important topic for myself, both personally and professionally. I'm Rowena Maxwell. My pronouns are she, her, and I run customer service within Accenture. So Accenture is a large global consulting organisation. We both create our own products, but also implement other people's, and we're also a huge consumer of technology as well. And as an organisation, we've declared a commitment to accessibility, and we've started our own journey. And our commitment is that 100% of what we create and 75% of what we consume, so it's less bold than you, Marianne, but 75% of what we consume in terms of our high volume products will be fully accessible. And if we move on, I guess why does it matter to us? And it matters to us twofold, right? It matters to us internally, and it matters to us externally. It matters internally because it does matter. It matters to our people, and it matters to our teams. We employ over 700,000 people globally, and we know through research that 45% of people with a disability do not tell their employer because they're afraid of being judged. And if people can't be open, if they can't be transparent about it, then we're not going to get optimal productivity out of them. So it really matters to us that our people feel safe to be open. And then secondly, it really matters to us externally in the market. It matters to us perception of self within the wider community, and we follow a code of conduct with all of our suppliers, so that we work to audit them as well as ourselves, so that the larger suppliers have to align, but also with smaller suppliers that we can help support them. So research is suggesting to us that companies that embrace diversity and inclusion have access to 4 million more people within their employment pool. And we are undergoing an enormous war for talent in terms of people that can come join us. So by having the right brand, we increase our ability to win that war in talent and get people to work for us. So hugely important to us internally and externally. And we've taken this to the heart of what we do. So in this context, we're partnering with Citizens Advice to deliver a contact centre solution. And as you heard from Matt, one of the core criteria was our accessibility. Now, the product that we use is an AWS product called Amazon Connect. And Amazon and AWS are natively accessible. It's one of the things that they do a lot of work around. But we combine that with a product that we've also created, which we call UAP. And what it does is it creates a single portal for colleagues, because colleagues are so important in creating that right customer experience that we want to achieve through a contact center solution. So this UAP solution is something that we created using Amazon services, but we had to combine it together, and that's where we needed to make sure that we were fully accessible. My team is very much focused on customer journeys, colleague journeys, what it's like to experience the product. But we also know that we're not perfect. And we have a team of internal specialists that help make sure that we align to what we say we're going to do. So that intent that we've got, our promises that we make, we have an internal team that makes sure we hold ourselves accountable to that. So to that end, I'm going to hand over to Simon, who'll let you know how he kept us on track to our commitment. So Simon, I was going to say you're my police guard, but I think that's probably doing you a disservice. Maybe you're not my police guard, but you're our guide, right? You've worked very heavily with the team to make sure that as we go through this journey, we align to the commitments that you saw Matt is holding us to in terms of the procurement space, because that's hugely important for us too. So do you want to move on, Marion and Simon? You can take us through how you hold us our feet to the fire, hold us accountable.
Hi everybody, yes, hi, I'm Simon Els, my pronoun is he, she. So I'm an accessibility subject matter expert. So I work with internal projects and clients to advise them on accessibility by design approach. And I tend to work to ingrain an accessibility first mindset throughout the life cycle of a project, from idea to requirements to design to the final product. So I was invited to join the Citizens Advice UAP project to keep accessibility and usability in the forefront of their mind and train them and support them to reach the accessibility standards required. So originally I was tasked to conduct an accessibility audit on the UAP to assess the current level of compliance against the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines 2.1 AAA, known as WCAG, as we've mentioned before. Just to give you a sense of scale out there, WebAIM, a non-profit organization based out in the US, last year analyzed the accessibility of 1 million homepages. So this is customer-facing websites. And the results were frankly shocking. 97.4% of them homepages had a WCAG violation. So that's a sense of scale. So you can only imagine what that is on internal products and staffing products. So I conducted an audit on the UAP through a mixture of automated, but most importantly, manual testing using several assistive technologies, so screen reader, screen magnifier, voice recognition software, and native devices. Manual testing is important in this process, and unfortunately it takes time and there's no quick wins, because automated testing only finds about 30% of the issues, and let's be honest, I think 30% is generous. So manual testing is important to use assistive technology. It's really key to understand and highlight the issues. So I conducted an audit against the AAA standards using the high priority user journey. So I was just acting like a user. Within my audit, when I found the issues, I tried to articulate the issue and try to describe the barriers that users might face, because I believe that really helped the team to understand why they're actually fixing that issue. And then I split all the issues into A, AA, and AAA, and then created a prioritized list. Next slide, please. So all the issues I found during the audit, we added to the backlog because it matters to us. Then I worked with the project team to try and prioritize with my recommendations. Then we worked with Citizens Advice, and they allowed us to reprioritize the full backlog to help us on our accessibility commitments. And they helped review the list, and then they actually brought some certain accessibility items forward. So we worked together to do that. And I just want to call out one of the examples. So one of the examples was a defect to a AA criteria reflow, which you've heard before, is the content can be presented without loss on various screen sizes. So that's on a desktop screen, zoomed all the way up to 400% and down to a mobile screen size. You might also know it as a responsive web design. I must admit, when I was doing the prioritizing in the backlog, I didn't prioritize this highly, but Citizens Advice made it a priority for us. So as you can see on the screen, currently on the left-hand side, there's a screenshot there, and that's a UAP zoomed into 300%, and you can see content squashed, it's lost content. So that's a WCAG violation. So we're working with multiple internal teams to redesign the UAP to reflow. So the screenshot on the right is a future design where the UAP zoomed up to 400%. You can see the content is nicely stacked on top of each other. Next slide, please. I just want to quite touch on next steps for the product. So it's a constant accessibility circle. So first of all, we want to go live and we want to complete the accessibility and user items in our backlog. And then we want to reassess the AA and AAA compliance once it's live. And then if we find any WCAG violations, we will prioritize them and fix them. And then that goes with any further or new enhancements to the UAP. We will assess the accessibility throughout the build lifecycle of that component. And then we would deploy or add all the new fixes in live. And then the circle will repeat over time, which will then embed that accessibility first mindset into the team. So thank you for that. And I'd like to hand over back to Rowena.
So look, I wanted just to leave you with three things from our perspective, and I hope what I did with Simon sharing all of our warts as well is let you know that we're not perfect, right? Despite our very bold commitments to accessibility, we really recognise that it's a journey, and it's a journey that we've started, we've not completed, and that it's a journey that will continue because it isn't one and done. So we had to start somewhere, and I would encourage you, as Marianne laid out at the start, start somewhere. You know, the important thing is starting and knowing that it's a continuous journey that you're going to be evolved in, because it's always going to evolve, right? The technology is constantly evolving. We're now thinking about what does it mean within the metaverse? How's that going to impact customer service? So start somewhere, start small. You won't be able to solve for everybody immediately, but what you can do is pick something and succeed. And although we're talking about the importance of technology, it doesn't need to be high tech. There are small changes we can all make as we leave here today, and I've learned a lot through working with Marion and Simon, despite the fact that I've been working in customer service and employee experience for 25 years, I've learnt a lot on this journey. So there's practical steps. You could pause at the start of a meeting and invite attendees to share any accessibility needs or ask in advance. When you're sharing screens, you can include it in your chat to make sure that people can access documentations and view them in their own way with their own screen readers. So takeaway number one, start somewhere. It's important to get started. Miller.
Thanks, Verena. So as a UX designer and someone who's been responsible for this work with Citizens Advice, I'm really always advocating for putting people at the heart of our design. And through our work with Citizens Advice, there are a couple of key things that have stood out to me about how to succeed in meeting the needs of all of our users and doing that through design. So the first thing is that accessibility really must be designed for from the start, rather than leaving it as an afterthought. So what this means is considering the diverse needs of all of your users and doing that at every step of the design process. So this starts to not only unlock greater innovation as we start to approach problems from new and different perspectives, but it's also cheaper and easier for your organisation, as it can save up to 80% on development costs as we avoid those expensive and really quite complex revisions and adjustments further down the line. The second way to really succeed in accessible design is to embed an accessibility first mindset and do this across your organisation. So that means in all teams and really at all levels. This will help to increase the number of employees who consciously consider accessibility and do so on a daily basis. So for example, implementing some of those small changes that Rowena mentioned. And then these people can then bring this understanding and really way of thinking to the design table. And I think what's really important here is that the value created by this mindset shift extends well beyond design, and it starts to open up opportunities at all layers of the organisation to better meet the diversity of needs of your users, both employees and customers alike.
Thanks, Miller. And look, and I guess the final thing I wanted just to be very clear on is this isn't pink and fluffy. This isn't a nice to have. We do a lot of research and we look at a lot of research, and all the data is pointing back to the same point, that this will drive, it helps save costs and it helps drive profitability. So the reason why it matters to us is because it matters to our colleagues, it matters to our shareholders, and it matters to our communities. So thanks, Marianne, for the opportunity to work with Citizens Advice and be part of this journey with you.
Thank you, Rowena, and thank you to Accenture for being with us. And thank you to everyone for listening. I suppose all that remains to say is if you want to talk to us about any of these things, you can see here lots of us are on LinkedIn, so please feel free to reach out. But with that, I will hand back to Jane, and I think we'll be looking at questions.
Thank you so much, everyone. That was absolutely fascinating. And certainly I've been taking lots of notes as people have been talking. It's something that, as I said at the beginning, is really important to Even Break. We're very fortunate to have testers within our organisation because we only employ disabled people. What we can do is say to them, have a look at this tech we're thinking of buying through your screen reader and see if it works. Which is really helpful. But we do also use professional testers that we bring in. I felt shocking, although not surprising, that only 6% of the developers that you spoke to knew how to or could develop your solution to AA standard. You know, I really feel that in 2022, that should be the minimum standard for every product that is available for sale. But we know it isn't. You know, we aim for AAA because we only employ disabled people, and all of our customers are disabled people. So it's incredibly important for us. But finding providers that will even do AA, let alone AAA, is incredibly difficult even now, you know, as we speak. So we have a long way to go. And this is a really important topic. So we've had a couple of questions in. Dean mentioned earlier on, I think he actually asked the question to just the panelists, but I'll read his question out anyway, which was, how did you agree including testing of software from suppliers with the procurement people in your organisation? And how willing were suppliers to provide you with test environments, etc.? And I know that Lindsay answered some of that on the chat, but I just wondered if you wanted to expand a little bit on that, Lindsay?
Yeah, sure. So we definitely had varying levels of willingness from suppliers. I think what can help is putting this in the invitation to tender stage. They're much more willing to agree to providing a sandbox or something up front when they're at that stage, rather than when you get to the preferred supplier stage, they're probably less likely to be compelled to do it at that point. But we definitely had to make compromises. So we've had suppliers that said they're not able to provide that, but they could do a demo with them driving the testing, which, wasn't ideal, but in that scenario, that was sort of the best option that we had. From the procurement side, I don't know if Matt has anything sort of further to add.
Yeah, I was just going to say, like, similar to you, like there have definitely been like kind of compromises that we've had to make. I think in an ideal world, you would do this testing on like all of the products that you're kind of looking at, but from a time and cost point of view, that's kind of unlikely, and suppliers are less willing to do it if they know that they're one of, say, 5. So I think other times as well, we've had to say we'll do the testing for basically once the supplier has reached preferred supplier status, and that's one of the final hurdles to get over, and then they're sort of more willing to do it, knowing that if the testing goes well, then they've won the contract.
If I may build on it as a supplier and owner, one of the things that was hugely helpful for us was how transparent Citizens Advice have been about the importance for them. So I said, we've got a commitment for our products to be fully accessible, and we believe they are as we provide them. But actually what we found was through providing you with access to our test environments, which you asked for early doors, is you found things and we found things that actually were on our product backlog and that we knew about, that maybe we hadn't prioritised quite as robustly as we should have done. Simon shared the example of the 400% reflow. We'd done 200 but not 400 because we believed nobody would ever look at stuff on a mobile app, that it was fine for the desktop. Right? And actually, for you to go, no, this is important, you do need to reprioritise, it was important. So as a supplier, I would say being very clear up front by doing your testing up front and highlighting the gaps to us made it much easier for us to comply, because we wanted to, but we still had gaps, and you helped us fill those. Although it's a journey, right? We're not perfect, and I do want to stress that it is a journey that we're on together.
I think that open, honest transparency is crucial, isn't it? I mean, we found that, we can find providers who will be honest and say, we're not sure we're as accessible as you need us to be, but we're willing to work with you and, work in partnership with you. So the product is tested by ourselves and by our professional testers that we're as we go through. But you have to have that relationship whereby they're willing to say, no, we haven't got this quite right yet. We need some support, in how to do that. So that relationship is absolutely crucial, isn't it? Another comment in the chat is about being surprised at how disinterested large public sector organisations can be regarding the legal risks of not providing accessible software and services. I think that's, such a good point. And when you think of that, most things now are digital, whether it's claiming benefits, whether it's paying your council tax, whatever it might be, that actually there are still an awful lot of technology that isn't even public facing, that isn't as accessible as it should be. So yes, that certainly is an issue. Another question from Sophie is, how does this accessibility technology feed into your learning platforms? So whether that's internal or external, and possible additional needs like dyslexia, for example. So those learning platforms are really important as well, and we've had the same problem when we're looking for e-learning providers, for example, and making sure that they are as accessible as they can be. And anybody got any comments on learning platforms and accessibility?
I don't work on that team, but I can give a little bit of what we do at Citizens Advice. So our learning platform definitely isn't fully accessible. And again, we've struggled to find one that was fully accessible on the market. I guess what we do within that team is the quick wins. So text size, alt text on the images. In terms of dyslexia, I'd have to speak to the team to find out more about how they consider that. But as well as those quick wins, we create sort of transcripts, and if there's videos on there, we can have like Word documents with information in that is like an alternative form of way that you can engage with that content on that site. But still a long way to go with our learning platform as well as Citizens Advice.
Just one thing I can maybe add on that. I also don't particularly know anything about our learning platform, I'm afraid, but in terms of the additional needs side of things, is that while we use the guidelines, the AA standards are our guide, and our audit is focused around that. The advantage of providing tools for an internal audience is that we have a very close relationship with our users, and we do also respond to their specific needs and what people are requesting. So nothing actually specific has come up within my team, the Casebook team, about dyslexia, for example, but I did actually have something last week where somebody did make a request about improving the accessibility of a particular feature in use with JAWS, the screen reader, which hadn't been raised on our accessibility audit. And it's something that we will respond to because obviously it's meeting a real user need. So I think having that kind of flexibility to understand, that you have these guidelines over here, but you should also be focusing on your specific users and what they need is really important as well.
Thank you. Yeah, a couple of questions which I'm going to put together because they're linked in the question and answer box. One is, as part of auditing, do you ever use people with lived experiences to make those assessments of how accessible web pages are? And is this fed back and built into that process? But another question that's allied to that is that they'd be interested to hear thoughts on how to balance the value of testing with colleagues who have particular accessibility needs with the risk of burdening these staff with additional work which impacts their ability to do their usual role. And I can certainly comment on that from Even Break's perspective, in that we do have, we're fortunate to have members of the team who are screen reader users who use different kinds of tech. And certainly we're very conscious of, if we say to them, can you spend some time looking at this tech, that we make sure that their workload isn't then caters for that. So it's not just something that they have to do in their spare time and over and above their day job, that it actually is catered for. So that would be a response from Even Break. But from either Citizens Advice or Accenture, anything on about how you use people with lived experiences for those assessments?
I'm happy to respond, Jane, and to iterate what you've said, right? So actually through Accenture, we work with Microsoft, and we have some of our team with lived experiences actually testing the Microsoft products for them as they go through, and have identified many challenges and changes that we feed into Microsoft through our partnership with them. And I think key to that is exactly what you said. It's not an extra task, it is the task, and it has importance, it has gravitas, and time and space is made for it. So I appreciate the question. I think it's crucial and it's vital, and if it is that, it has to be the role, not a favor.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and lived experience, there's no technological substitute for it, because you can do your electronic testing, but it's not the same as real people who might use the product. And then the final question, because we're coming up to the end of our session, is what advice would you give to very small charities, 3 to 10 staff, who don't know where to start on their accessibility journey, have much awareness of it, and don't have any budget to undertake this work? I suspect there are many organisations in that space who are keen to do this, but don't necessarily have the resources or the knowledge or the budget. Anybody, any ideas on that?
I would say, and feel free to jump in if others have ideas, but I would say the key thing is to try and upskill. So, we are obviously a large charity at Citizens Advice, but within my team specifically, I would say that we didn't have a huge amount of knowledge. I certainly didn't. So doing reading and then starting with those basics that we discussed. I mean, it depends, whether you're developing in-house or whether you have a third party who's kind of developing your digital tools that can also support you. But starting with the basics like font size, contrast, magnifying, that everybody can understand and appreciate. And then, as you develop your knowledge, hopefully you'll be able to kind of build on that. But yes, if you have external organizations building tools for you, don't be afraid to lean on them, because they are the experts, obviously, in their product and their tools. And so they should be able to kind of guide you in that respect.
If you don't mind, I can jump in as well. From my experience, I started somewhere. I just said, what's accessibility? And I went and Googled it, and it snowballed from there. And the first thing what I did is I picked a good website. So I used the BBC website, and I started learning to use accessible assistive technology. I downloaded the screen reader. There's a free one. Then I started just testing using assistive technology and getting a hang of it. And from there, it starts to unravel. You start to notice things and see things. So my advice is go and have a little look on the internet and find out exactly the basics, and then download a screen reader and just use the software and start using it, and you'll start to realize and see stuff, and stuff will start to click, and you start to pick new things up all the time. It's a continuous journey. You're not going to be an expert overnight. I'm still learning. I've done this 5 years and I'm still learning. I'm still seeing stuff, new stuff coming. So my advice is don't be afraid. Just start somewhere.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And I think, what I've got from this is how important accessibility is in terms of digital and technology, both internally and externally. It's not just about customer facing, although that's crucial and we've got a long way to go on that, but it's also about making sure that employees, team members can access all the tech that you're using internally. So, and the other thing I think I've got from it is that this is a journey, that it's consistent, it's constantly changing. It's not something that you can think, right, we've got it right, that's it, end of story. That things will change, technology changes, we add different things to our websites or our technology. We've got to make sure that that's accessible as well. And so it is a journey of continuous improvement, and what a great journey to be on, because the more we improve in this area, the more people can access the workplace and all of the tech that we use. So thank you very, very much to all of our speakers today, to everybody from Citizens Advice and everybody from Accenture. I've learned a lot. I hope the people listening have learned a lot. We've got some nice comments in the chat thanking us for this. If anybody has any further questions or whatever, please get in touch with us at Even Break and we can pass them on to the speakers, and who I'm sure will be happy to be in touch with you. And we're here to support, and any questions would be great. And there will be a recording of this, which will be available if you want to watch it again, or if you want to share it with any of your colleagues or anybody else that you think might benefit. So thanks to our sign language interpreter, thanks to our captioner, who've had a lot of work to do over the last hour. And thanks again to all of our speakers and to everybody who joined the session today. Hope to see you soon. Thank you very much.